I'm a whole human outside of this, right? Yes, the job is important, but it's a job and we're human. I've only really started to sort of lean into being authentically me in the recent past. So if I started that 10 years ago, I just think about how many more people I might have inspired and just like the level of comfort that I would have had. But I don't beat myself up over it because everything happens in the right time.
You're listening to HR Superstars, a podcast brought to you by 15Five. On this show, we talk to strategic people leaders who are making a meaningful impact in their organizations and shaping the future of work. So get ready to be inspired and discover the secrets behind building high-performing teams and fostering a culture of growth and thriving. The future of HR starts here. Welcome, everyone. I'm Karina Young, VP of People here at 15Five. Now, today we're naming something that every HR leader knows, but rarely says out loud. That's the tension between being the polished, strategic voice in the room and being just a real, vulnerable human. We sit at the center of the messiest, most complex parts of what drives an organization forward. We guide people through change. We're expected to have answers, mostly good ones, and to always know the right next step, even when we're reacting to life's curveballs just like everyone else is. And somewhere along the way, through suggestion or just survival, we learn to tuck away the messier parts of ourselves so that we stay credible, calm, and in control. Sound familiar? But what if that's not what actually makes us great at this job? What if we've been rewarded for a coping mechanism that quietly undermines our own well-being, growth, and impact? And what if being fully human, honest, imperfect, real, isn't a liability, but our greatest leadership advantage? That's what we're digging into today with Nicole DuBois, CHRO for Graham Windham. Nicole has spent nearly 2 decades in HR and recently made a shift to be even more strategic in her role. And in doing so, she's redefining how she influences culture, supports leaders, and drives change. Nicole, welcome, and thank you so much for joining us today. Tell me, what's like the movie trailer version of you, your life, outside of work?
Oh my, thank you so much for having me, Karina. You know, I'm a CHRO by day. I'm a mom. I live in Jersey. And I've been leaning into a phase in my life and in my career where I've just like been enjoying having conversations and mentoring and sort of giving back to others, mentoring students and speaking to folks that are younger in their professions. And I'm an avid traveler, so hence I am in San Pedro now. So I travel all the time, love it.
That's so incredible, Nicole. Tell me a little bit about kind of what you've been doing with your organization. You've been there for almost 19 years, which is cool. A lot of people don't have that kind of tenure in
Yeah.
organizations anymore. See a lot more hopping around. Can you talk us through your journey from the tactical side of HR really into focusing on the more strategic parts?
Absolutely. Yeah. And it was just 19 years on June 5th, which is wild. I feel like I've literally grown up there. And what I would say is when I got my start in HR at Graham, HR needed, there were some gaps in sort of infrastructure and policy and operations. And, you know, we needed to implement our first HRIS, right? And to make sure that, you know, our policies and processes were clear. And that was one of the muscles that I'd already developed, right? Even from prior work in research that I did some work outside of HR. And so I brought that, that level of, I guess, organizational skill and, you know, sort of policy writing and policy enforcement to the work. And that was really important at the time. And I think over time, and especially recently, there's been a shift, I think, in the field, and there's been a shift at Graham to where I know I'm having conversations with folks about what is the experience that we want to create for our people, right? What are folks experiencing and feeling as they show up as employees? Are they psychologically safe? Are they feeling like they have opportunities to grow and to thrive and to feel like they belong, right? And so it's really shifted, you know, in terms of like the way that we engage employees, the way that we check in to understand, you know, at each touch point, even prior to hire, we're talking about the candidate experience. Are we thoughtful enough about how folks are being communicated with and how we're sort of helping folks to navigate that experience, right? And so it's shifted so much. And one of the things that we've been talking about as a leadership team quite often as well is thinking about the journey that an employee has from the moment that we're welcoming them in the onboarding experience and throughout the course of their trajectory as an employee. What is their learning journey, going to look like? How do we co-create that, sort of with them? Of course, the policies are important and having organization and structure is important, but it's become something that's much more. The types of conversations that I've sort of been having externally is a testament to that, where I've been trying my best to show up and to sort of show more of myself and to model that for others. So yeah, it really has shifted a lot to answer your question.
I'm curious how you felt when that shift was first happening. And, the first time someone said to you, "Hey, Nicole, we've got to think about the employee experience totally differently. We're going to reimagine what we do." How did you feel going into that? Like sometimes I wonder too, I even think about that. I was talking to some HR execs yesterday about we're often expected in HR to lead the charge on all of these changes, but not really given the time or always the mentorship of this is actually what it looks like in practice. It's just, this is what we're doing. You're an expert, so do it.
Yeah, one of the questions that I ask all the time, I still ask it, I think, is, where does HR go when HR needs HR? Because, like, literally, I think what you're speaking to is exactly right. It's like, where do you begin? And for everybody, what makes a positive sort of, workplace experience, that varies. It really does, is a part of what I've observed. And so it's my whole thing is you just start, right? So we've started with engagement surveys and to really like unpack, not only the quantitative responses, but the qualitative, the comments. What are people saying would be a difference maker, for them? And then to make sure that once we've administered those surveys and we've unpacked what we've learned, that we're getting back to people right away. And so then we start with the next thing. It's not really sage advice, but the only thing that I can offer is you got to start somewhere. And that's a part of what I learned. And I didn't necessarily receive mentorship on it, to your point, but it was just sort of, I don't want to say it's trial and error, but it's like just starting somewhere in small ways to see if a change could be initiated. Yeah.
Yeah, but I think you make a great point there, which is we are often leaned on, right, as the experts in all the things, and we know it. But sometimes it's okay to just take that first small step forward
That's right.
in making a shift. You don't actually have to know, and we're never going to know the ins and outs of everything. That I think part of the fun of what we do in the HR function is we get to do so much, but it just means we take one small step forward at a time.
That's exactly right.
So let's talk a little bit about your book and the writing that you do, right? You shared that you once published a book under a pseudonym. Tell me what shifted for you in sharing that you were the one who wrote that and taking that ownership and control.
Yes, I did. It was last year, as a matter of fact. It feels like it was like a long time ago, but it was actually January of 2024. I decided to publish a memoir and I published it under a pseudonym. And the story, that I was telling, which was my own story, was about a time in my life where I was going through a lot. So I was the uber polished and just showing up however I needed to be, professional CHRO with all these work responsibilities. But inside, I was going through a lot, an invisible chronic illness, multiple sclerosis, a divorce, like real life things, right? And a part of my healing around that involved traveling. So I went on a solo trip to Greece for 2 weeks and I was writing and I was writing. And I knew that when I was going through all of that, that I wished that I could find a story that I could connect to that was similar to my own. And I found other stories of other experiences, but not quite mine. Not professional, person of color, of Caribbean descent, first generation, trying to hold it all together. And so I was like, well, since I can't buy the story, I'm going to write the story. And it was like a exercise in vulnerability, like in the most profound way. I'm like, someone that would probably define herself as an introvert. And so me sharing and being vulnerable is a really difficult thing. But it was a part of what I felt I needed to do. And I think that sharing it under a pseudonym was the way that I needed to take my first small step. I think that I probably wouldn't have published it and put it out there if I was publishing it under my real name initially. But I had a paradigm shift, like a aha moment. But I had a moment last year where I was at a book expo and someone said to me, she was like giving a keynote speech, that she understood why I did it. She understood that I was, a C-suite executive and the choice that I made and the reasons behind it, but that I could only be one person, right? And that all of my experiences and my wounds and my pains and everything were a part of me. And it was like a light bulb went off and I was like, "Oh my gosh, she's so right." And immediately I went and I told my boss about it. I shared on LinkedIn a post that was like, "Dear readers, I need you to know something. I wrote this book and this is my story. I'm the person behind this pseudonym." And the outpouring was just, an outreach that I got. I was shocked. I was stunned. I didn't know how it was going to be received, my posts and everything, but people were so appreciative. And I had folks that reached out that said to me, "You sharing your story makes me feel, more comfortable in being me." And so that it was actually something that ended up being a tremendous gift to me. And now every time that I talk about it, I kind of get chills, right? Because I think
Yeah.
if I feel so much more comfortable and I'm like, "Oh my God, it's okay to be me." It's not like I wrote about like being a serial killer or something. I was writing about like a real life like thing that so many people go through. So yeah, making that choice was the right choice at the time. And it was also the right choice later to come forward as, Nicole DuBois, the real person behind the story.
And what was that effect on in your organization, like from your peer leaders, from your team? How did they react to it?
Yeah. So as I was mentioning, the first person I told was my boss. I was so nervous because I was like, "Oh my gosh, I'm going to share my story. And suppose, my colleagues find out and the board finds out and whatever." And what she said to me is, "But, suppose they find out anyway, especially in this age, this digital age and AI and what have you. Suppose they put two and two together. Maybe the question, that they would have is, well, why didn't you share this? And why did you, sort of keep it, hidden?" And I think she was really right. And then I started to share with others, including members of my team. And I shared sort of like just the fact that I wrote a book, but
Yeah.
also shared some podcasts, episodes that I was a guest on, and so on. And I remember one of my team members was like, "Oh my gosh, that is like the most real that I've ever seen you. And I've worked with you for like almost 10 years, you know?" And it was just like this, I don't know, this weight lifted off my shoulder because the authenticity of the conversations just shifted. And so I've seen, shift, and now I'm proud. It's like I'm not afraid anymore. I'm not, worried about like, well, what are people going to think and what are people going to say? And I feel more comfortable. And I think that comes through in all of my interactions with, my peers, my team, with everybody. Cause I'm like, I'm in my own skin and I'm comfortable in my own skin.
Yeah, exactly. It's that, I was reading something today around that. When you get to the point of having the courage to not be worried about disappointing other people, that we kind of each hit this moment in life, whether it's through an experience like this or something else, where we just realize that actually doesn't matter. And those ideas of whether it's a fear or based in reality, which a lot of it can be, like you talked about earlier, those different pieces of ourselves that are intersecting that do lead to that fear of, can I share this with everyone? Can I show everyone my true self? What might the consequences be? There are people who do face very real consequences for those things, but figuring out how to do that, especially with your community and in your workplace, of this is me, I'm going to show up because it's better for me. Like, you don't have to worry about, what am I hiding? What am I protecting versus who do I show up as in this meeting versus the next one?
I think that's so right. And I also want to like, I realized for me, because I've been there 19 years and because of where I sit, that those are a part of the context that probably made me feel like more comfortable and like, what is there to risk? And I also want to normalize that not everybody is in that place for variety of different reasons, organizational culture, professional relationships. And so that is okay too, right? I only hope that sharing my story with one person or 10 people, if that can be impactful in a positive way, then I feel like I've done, what I set out to do by writing the book in the first place, right? And if someone, even one person, feels more comfortable being themselves because I am sharing my own story, then, then that's like,
Yeah,
joy
that's
for me, right? I think if there are folks that are sitting out there that are like, I don't think I could do this. I think there are real risks, or I've seen real risks. And that, you have to like sort of know, it's a judgment call, I would say.
exactly. But I think too, people being able to see someone like yourself go out and be vulnerable about those parts of your story, dealing with chronic illness, going through a major change in relationships, all of those things together. There are people who can relate to that in so many different ways. Do the thing you wish you could do, or say the thing you wish you could say, like that person said to you at the conference. You can only be one person. I wonder if that person knows how much it influenced you. Have you ever gone back and talked to them or told them?
Oh my gosh. I sent them a message. The person's actually a council person in the town where I live. And so I did reach out and sent them a message, but there's an event that I'm going to go to and I want to go up to her in person because that made all the difference. And I will never forget it. There's just like those moments and those people that just stand out. And she's one of them. And that moment is one of them. For
That's
sure.
cool. I love that you'll get the chance to tell that to her. I'll be curious to see how she reacts to it
Yeah.
when you do. So let's talk a little bit about this pressure in
Sure.
particular when it comes to HR. Like, how have you seen this tension show up in HR teams and HR leaders with being polished, being professional, doing everything the right way versus having to create space to really be a full whole person? What makes that feel like it's in some ways unique in our function?
At Graham, for example, we talk about how HR is sort of like the first line of contact. And so we're representing the organization and, how we show up in person and our communications really matters. Sometimes, like my staff will remind me, and I'm glad when they do, we're employees too. We're people too. We have like lives and stressors and everything. And so, I think it's really important for us to recognize that and to find connection. I think that's like one of the most important things. I talk a lot about networking and finding like meaningful connections. And so, to answer the question that I sometimes ask myself, which I said before, when HR needs HR needs other people, like, to connect to share what's going on and what is stressful and what's difficult, and to learn maybe from others that what you're going through is totally normal. Like I'm a part of several councils and professional networks and from people in like varied industries, and it's so awesome and sometimes like normalizing when I am talking about my experience as a nonprofit CHRO, when I learned that like people in huge companies are experiencing similar things. Different generations in workforce, sort of show up, and what people sort of expect as, a part of an organization's value proposition. There's so much commonality. And so when we have those conversations, and we can sort of like understand that we're not alone, I think that makes all the difference. Even when we feel like we have to show up uber polished or whatever it is, it's like, no, we're real too. We got to vent. We need to, put our heads together with others to, figure out what works and what doesn't work. I mean, that is true for us as well, even though we're HR.
Completely. Well, and I understand why it can be hard for employees to always see and understand that because HR may be the voice or the face behind some of the hardest messages that
Yeah.
come out in the organization. And even if it's not always HR's decision, like we do represent a lot of that. And it's being able to figure out where are those people? Are they in your organization? Is it an HR leadership community that you're a part of, someone who you go to? I mean, that's why they say having a best friend at work is one of the greatest ways to increase engagement because you have that one person you can go to, your fail safe of today was absolute garbage. Like I just need somewhere to go and have a place where it's okay to have a bad day. And I don't think that that's always normalized for HR teams. It's like
Yeah.
we got to be up, we got to be smiling, we got to make everyone feel good about this. And I was even, reminded in a conversation I had last week with someone of people actually really want to hear that organizations and leaders recognize when change is hard, that it's not all
Yes.
sunshine and roses and everything's going to be great. Sometimes the truth of the matter is this is just tough. This is a tough day, the tough message. We get it. And that even that vulnerability changes how people think about and engage with an organization.
I think that's right. And I think sharing that and being real is important. Sometimes it's been my experience, this may vary, that sometimes those connections that I was speaking of are outside of the organization. Like it's hard, a very senior leadership position or in an HR position to have a lot of friends in an organization. It's a lonely place,
Right.
as they say, right?
Yeah.
And, for me, it is, I sort of really appreciate the councils and the groups and the connections that I make, external to the organization. It also broadens my perspective. So that's another sort of like positive outcome of that, making connections with folks that are in other industries,
Yeah.
in other geographic areas. I love when I travel to connect with other people that are, people operations or in HR as well. That's what works for me. And it fuels me. It really does. Yeah.
Yeah, 100%. One of my go-to friends I text is the comms leader. And we met at like a few organizations ago, but are still close. And I
Mhm.
love being able to hear her unique perspective on what I'm going through. It's like she isn't in HR, but she gets it, but she also
Yeah.
offers such great advice. And I'm like, man, I didn't think about it that way. That's actually what I needed to
Yeah.
pull myself out.
Tired of high turnover costs draining your resources? 15.5's performance management platform helps you find and act on employee turnover risk before it's too late. From continuous feedback loops to manager coaching and training that improves role clarity, recognition, and retention. Learn more at 15.5.com or click the link in the show notes.
What does strategic HR look like to you when it's based in authenticity?
One of the a way that sort of shows up, I every year think about how my team, how we're going to organize our work and our priorities. We're co-creating sort of like that priority list. And this year, we literally did that a few weeks ago and decided that there were a few things that we were going to center. One of them being compassionate leadership, another being networking and meaningful connections. Then there was something about like technology, and leveraging that. And so, but the reason why those areas were decided on as priority areas for the way that we were going to plan and lead our work over the course of the year is because I really think it's because of the conversations that we've been having about vulnerability and authenticity and what like it means to understand just like the humanity of our workforce, right? And that they also have needs. And so, of course, we could plan for maybe an upgrade to our HRIS, or we just updated our employee handbook, working with our, employment council, all of that. But we're working with humans. And so everything that we do, whether it's around our wellness programming, whether it's around the leadership development and just learning experiences that we're creating, I found it really important. And my team that worked on this with me agreed that we center being real and being, human, that the workforce that we're working with are human beings. It literally has influenced what we've decided on our plan for the next 12 months. So everything like workshops and programming and engagement activities are all organized under those areas.
How does
So
that impact the employees in your organization? How do you see them reacting differently to your initiatives?
I think that what I hope, I should say, I know from my peers so far, they were like, wow, you have a plan with those themes. And, that sounds like incredible. And my hope is that our employees will experience the way that we're showing up this year as being responsive to what they've said. One of the things that is sort of unique about the industry that Graham sits in is that we're child, family, and community serving, and it's a really difficult space to be in, especially these times. The work for a lot of our workforce, especially our individual contributors, can be overwhelming at times. It can be crushing.
Yeah.
And we have people that during the COVID-19 pandemic or at any given moment are showing up in incredible ways for children and families when sometimes they have their own children and families
Yes.
at home that they're leaving. And so us recognizing that and creating sort of, a plan that centers that and those facts, I think that matters. And I hope that is something that is received as the organization creating a really positive workplace experience for our employees and that they
Yeah.
yeah.
Oh, yeah. Well, sometimes it's just, again, like those little small things. Like even when we get our executive team together for an offsite, there are certain months that we know, hey, this period of 3 weeks is off limits because it's
Sure.
my spring break in Colorado this week and it's someone else's kid's spring break and someone's got graduation. And that's a totally normal and accepted conversation to have as an executive team, which in other places I've been at is not. It's like, well, too bad. Doesn't really matter what's going on. You
Yeah.
need to show up and be where we ask you to when we ask you to do it. And just having that space allows us to know that we can care for the life outside of work that really matters
100%.
to us, and then show up for what work needs with total full attention and energy directed at that, and not the scrambling in my mind of, oh my gosh, I've left this at home, or now like my partner has to focus on this and that. And I'm thinking about 20 other things during the day. A super small change like that has that ripple effect, like you're talking about, that makes such a difference to engagement and connection and ultimately retention in an organization, especially for senior leaders.
Absolutely. I was at an event some months ago where someone had to take a call in the middle, and she was like on a panel, right? And it was a call from her kids. And, the person that was hosting it was trying to sort of, say something like, well, she had to leave for an emergency meeting. And she stopped in front of the audience and she was like, no, I need to leave for my kids. And I'm never going to apologize for that. And that like hit me because of course not. I'm a mom.
Yeah.
And if my son needs me, I'm there, and I started to actually use it and say that never apologize for having to leave or take a call or whatever when it is, because of something that you're dealing with in your real life or someone that matters, especially your kids. So
Yeah.
I think we have to practice that, model it, and make that okay.
Exactly. Well, that can be that first instinct. I do think, especially as you climb the corporate ladder, it can feel like that balance is a little bit murky, especially as a woman in leadership.
Yeah.
Can I say I'm leaving for my kids and not be seen as someone who doesn't take work seriously, someone who isn't as fully committed,
Yeah.
right? Like, again, like those fears are validated in many organizations, and in many they aren't, but it's that first gut reaction can be, I need to hold it back instead of just, no, I'm going because my family needs me. My kids need me. If you don't have kids, whoever needs you, like I have a need that is important and I'm going to attend to it. That's it. Bottom line.
Absolutely. And I think people have to make decisions about why they are in a place, at a workplace, and what works for them, right? 'Cause there are some people that are like, listen, this is a job, and so I'm going to
Yeah.
work with what I got. And others that do have the space and the flexibility to make a different decision if that's not the right workplace for them.
Totally. And how do you provide coaching, Nicole, to leaders who are struggling to be vulnerable, to be authentic, or stuck in a more outdated way of leading that's not really meeting their team's needs?
Yeah. So, I mean, a few ways. First of all, we actually have a coaching platform that we make available to our employees for one-on-one coaching, which is something that I'm so happy we brought online in the fall of 2023, because it's not just for executives, it's for everybody. It's for our part-time staff, it's for individual contributors, new employees, long tenured employees. And so that's one of the things that's, I think coaching is incredible. Apart from that, it is exactly what we've been talking about. It is modeling. I think that it's in me sharing myself, and it's not only about like my personal story that I wrote about, but it could be about like my mistakes, when I was younger in my profession, or my fears about, like, as I referred to it, falling into HR because I kind of fell into HR, right? Or what I am thinking about doing for the next 5, 10 years of my life, which includes, other things, speaking engagements, and how I have fear about that, right? Just like being honest and real is, I think, a part of what inspires, motivates others to practice that authenticity themselves. So yeah, that's what I've literally found. I mean, it feels like I'm just like putting lip service to it, but like literally I have seen the power of that. And sometimes that has been because I've been on the receiving end of like witnessing someone being open and honest themselves. And that created like the space and gave me the freedom and the comfort to be vulnerable. Like someone that shared on LinkedIn a couple of years ago that they had a mental health disorder and had like a huge following. And I said, you know what? Because you were that brave, it just inspired me to be brave myself. And so I
Yeah.
have to be that to others.
Yeah, I do think we underestimate the value of just role modeling what works and holding the boundary there, right? Like if you have a leader who is doesn't want to be a part of it, is this doesn't work for me, that's not who I am. First of all, you will never fully change them. Change is something each of us owns ourselves. So you can bring in model as much, but we also have to know what is truly within and without of our control. But when you're the leader who shows up every time, authentic and vulnerable and real, at a certain point, it gets really hard for someone to keep combating you with something different.
Yeah,
We
that's
very, very early in my career, I worked in retail. And I think working retail is actually one of the greatest things anyone can do for any profession to learn about interacting with people and managing that. But one of the things they used to teach us when you deal with a difficult customer is kill them with kindness. And
uh-huh.
there's no better way to get someone to de-escalate than just continuing to show up as a nice person. You don't have to be over the top, cheesy, but you just continue being nice. And at
Absolutely.
some point, they wear down and they're like, this is actually a lot harder to be mean to someone who's trying than to be mean to someone who is combating you. That's easy to do. When
Yeah,
someone lights you up, like you can get ready to go, but just keep going. Just keep showing
yeah,
up as yourself. And it is really incredible how people change.
that's so right.
Yeah, I
100%.
think it's crazy to see. When you think about yourself and how you have changed really in the last 10 years, right? Like let's go back 10 years. Is 2015, Uptown Funk is the number one song on the radio. You're looking at yourself, you're next to yourself, Nicole, and you want to give yourself a piece of advice. What is it? What do you say to yourself back then that might have changed anything?
Yeah. If I was talking to myself 10 years ago, it would probably be something close to it's okay to be you. Because I think I was not there yet. It was like every day I was on an interview, sort of, right? To show up and, show out as like the uber professional, polished, never make a mistake, got to get it right, got to give the good advice, the sage advice, all of that. And it doesn't matter like that I'm a whole human, outside of this, right? Yes, the job is important, but it's a job and we're human. I would 100% tell myself that because my goodness, imagine how far I would have come along at this point, right? If since, I've only really started to sort of lean into being authentically me in the recent past, if I'm honest, right? So if I started that 10 years ago, I just think about how many more people I might have inspired and just like the level of comfort that I would have had. But I don't beat myself up over it because everything happens in the right time. So
You can't. If you would have done that 10 years ago, you wouldn't be on with us today, Nicole. You would
there
be
you go.
10 years ahead in your journey, and I would be fighting in your inbox with everyone else trying to get you to
That's so
come on.
funny.
But that's what's interesting, right? Is the season of our lives that we're in really do intersect sometimes at the very right moments. And
That's right.
I think it's fun to think about the past and look back to say, what if, I wonder, but not linger in there of,
Yeah.
man, I really wish I could have feel like I had to, because I do believe a lot of those journeys we go on, especially in HR and as leaders, were meant to go on in that time, those challenges. That's something that shaped us to the way we are today, that if we would have just done it right out the gate, we probably
Yeah.
actually wouldn't have the depth and really the authenticity that we do. Yeah.
So
So Nicole, we've got some really awesome questions from the group here. I want to tackle one question from what you were chatting about in the beginning around engagement surveys, is just talking about how you go out and build that trust with your organization on filling out engagement surveys, being honest. What's really worked for you?
yeah, one of the most important things that we found is we have to act on what we learn from surveys. Sometimes, if I'm honest, I'm not uber sad. It's not like we get 100% responses. So sometimes I'm like, oh gosh, I just wish we could get more people to engage and to share with us, their point of view. But when, the ones that do, the way that we maintain trust, build trust, and then maintain that trust is to actually follow up and act on suggestions and requests in the right timing. And, if I'm transparent, there have been times where we took too long to get back to people, and that did help to erode trust. And so we live, we learn, and then we're like, okay, the next time we're going to follow up in a few months, which we did with like a pulse survey, right? To check back in on things that we knew came up in the previous survey, and then to communicate broadly about the actions that we took. Like one of the things that we learned in one of our most recent surveys is that there were staff that felt like senior leadership was not sufficiently connected to what was really going on the ground. And so an action that we took is that we decided that the executive leadership team was going to have a rotating schedule at each of our locations and to publish it on our intranet so that we were clear and transparent about who was going to be at what site and when. And so that folks knew that and that they appreciate it when we are like in their spaces. We're not just sitting remotely or we're not just in our central administrative office. They really appreciated that. But that was because of what we learned from the survey. And so acting on what we learned is a part of how we build and maintain that trust.
I think that's 100% right, Nicole. I mean, that action that you take after a survey is where you build trust. And it is fair that we've all been in that position that we didn't act fast enough. We heard something, maybe we didn't do anything about it. That's okay. Like, that's the journey we're on. We're getting better day by day. But every time you take an action and you very clearly connect it back to feedback. Hey,
Yeah,
like, this is what we heard in the survey. You all asked for better connection with your executives for them to understand what you're experiencing. So this
right.
is what we're doing. People need to also see that connection. I've seen a lot of organizations who are like, we took these 10 actions, but nothing happened in engagement and nothing is going on. I was like, well, yeah, but who
Yeah,
knew about it? Well, wasn't
yeah.
it obvious? Wasn't it obvious? I'm like, not like
No,
nothing in an organization is obvious. If you feel like you're
absolutely
over
not.
communicating, you've probably just started communicating enough.
That's
Like
right.
you have to let people know what you are doing. And that takes time. It is okay that it takes time.
That's right.
I really encourage all of you to connect with myself, with Nicole on LinkedIn. There's so much that's unique to each organization. I think, Nicole, what you really shared in your story today with our audience and what I really take away from it is just taking that first step toward authenticity, that whatever it is that's holding you back, even if this isn't the right time for you to go fully there, just think of that one first way you can do it because it's really a benefit ultimately, at the end of the day, to ourselves, right? That's what makes us better leaders, better people. This is who we have control of, is ourselves completely. So we have to really take care of that and think about how we're showing up. So I want to thank you so much, Nicole, for being here, being authentic, sharing your story.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. It's
Yeah.
wonderful.
Thanks so much, everyone.
Engaged employees are your most valuable asset. They're innovative, loyal, and committed to achieving exceptional results. By fostering a culture of engagement, you'll unleash their full potential and create a competitive advantage that sets your organization apart. But how do you do it? Check out 15Five's Employee Engagement Playbook linked in the show notes. It explores the undeniable benefits of employee engagement and dives deep into how to measure it. I promise you'll learn actionable strategies to transform engagement insights into measurable outcomes.